Okay, I just want to welcome each one of you and thank you already for showing up. And I want to introduce to you tonight our amazing guest speaker, Megan. So I'm just going to tell you why Megan is here. I myself have a kindergarten writer, and I called Megan, who's one of our sponsor teachers, and I said, help, I know you are good at writing with kindergartners. This is your life. You have been teaching kindergartners to write. So help me. And she sat and talked to me for 15, 20 minutes. And by the end of it, I walked away with so many resources that I was like, Megan, please come teach all of our parents this. And she agreed. So I want to hand the floor over to Megan and just let you know that you are in for a treat. So thank you, Megan, and the floor is yours.
Oh boy, hi everybody. It's really exciting to get to talk about this. I really love kindergarten, and I also love writing, and if I get too worked up about it, just tell me, like, Megan, calm down a little bit and just stick to the points. And Katrina, you're going to be monitoring the text. So you guys, if you have a question, you can jump in, but you can also just type it in the text box, and Katrina is going to make sure that those get seen and asked so we can talk about that. Anyhow, I'm Megan Schneider. I'm a sponsor teacher here with Family Partnership. And a little bit about me, I was homeschooled all the way through high school growing up down in Homer. And then about 10 years ago, I came up and got my teacher's certification and degree here in Anchorage. I had just gotten married, so instead of diving straight into teaching, I switched over to starting a family. And then it was just 3 years ago that I picked up teaching again and went straight into a kindergarten classroom, which I loved. I absolutely love kindergarten. It's exciting to me. It's such a challenge, and it's such a wonder time of beginning education. So that's one of my absolute favorite things. The only thing better than I can imagine is what I'm doing right now, getting to work with homeschool families. So I love that I'm getting to pull kind of all of those things together tonight. I also have 2 kids. I have a 4-year-old in preschool and a 1st grade son. So they're straddling kindergarten right now. So this is really my world. It's something I really enjoy, and I'm excited to talk about it. So I'm going to pull up my little presentation. Here we go. And all right, can you guys see this all right? Let me make it full screen. Okay, so we're going over kindergarten and kindergarten writing in particular, and recognizing all of those stages of helping a kindergartner get from drawing pictures to writing sentences. It can seem really daunting, but there are, oh look, it doesn't want to go. There we go. There are steps that walk us through. So first, talking about the problem everybody feels. There's a juxtaposition between all of the assistance that reading gets, where you have these specific phonics programs that take you step by step from a student who can't read to suddenly being able to read. And then in writing, we don't have a lot of that step-by-step support, but there are still standards at the kindergarten level for requiring writing. So there's a lot of question, frustration, and what do we do in between? My child can't write. How am I supposed to meet this writing requirement? So I like to step back from that and say, yes, we struggle to give grace to this whole year where they can't write, but they're supposed to. It's an in-between. So instead, what we really need to do is trust that great things are being fostered right now, that this year counts, and that finding ways to accommodate and support the in-between steps are what is going to empower your child to feel like they're a writer and to tackle writing successfully and enthusiastically for years. So a writer happens long before they can actually write. And briefly, I want to just point out the standards. I don't want to talk a lot about them, but this is why we're talking about, and this is what can give kindergarten parents a little jolt, especially this first one here. It's the 8th language arts standard for kindergarten, and it's talking about needing to express ideas with drawings, letters, and words. So it's expecting your kindergarten student to write, but I want to break it down and show that actually it's expecting your kindergartner to draw. It's expecting you to be able to use dictation with them and let them share their stories. That's them having the attitude of a writer before they can write. And then there is some writing, using a combination of all of these to create writing samples for them to feel like a writer. And then the other thing we're addressing is 3 different areas of writing. Opinions. Most of you guys with kindergartners know that they do have and like to share opinions. Informative texts, so they get to see writing or see books teaching them things, and then they will love to mimic that and teach other people with their writing. And narratives, retelling stories. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go back real quick. This is the main one that we're talking about. Briefly, way over on this other side, we have using standard writing conventions. These are like the technical pieces of make sure you capitalize the beginning and put a period at the end. They're not very detailed for kindergarten, but this does come into play. This is something that should be a conversation and should start to have a place in their writing. And I put this one in the middle here because this isn't technically a writing standard. It's a speaking and expressing standard. But this is where so much of the writing concept and mindset comes from for kindergartners. So I put this in because I want to think about them communicating on paper, them communicating verbally with me so I can help them communicate on paper, and then some of those conventions that we're going to dialogue about so that they can get that exposure as we talk. This is a really big, scary looking standard page, but what I want you to notice is just this section for kindergarten. This is the writing standards for kindergarten. And several places like here begins in grade 3. Here's one that begins in grade 4, and most of the ones in between are actually all really neatly covered in that first, more succinct standard that we just looked at. But I pulled this up so that you can see it keeps on saying with guidance, with guidance, with guidance. The whole idea in that's all you have to read on those standards, just with guidance. The idea is this is not something we should sit back and expect kindergartners to be able to pull off on their own. The whole point is we should be working with them and showing them these things. That's fostering excitement. So that's all I want to say on the standards. So this was me reflecting a little more on the difference between reading and writing and how we pay attention to the steps in reading a lot, and we don't have access to the steps toward writing usually or as easily, but they really go hand in hand and they work together so beautifully in these little kindergartners' minds. So I was reflecting on how reading, it's modeled all over. We read aloud with them. They look through books and pictures. They recognize signs, environmental text, maybe a menu at a restaurant. They're noticing and understanding the value of reading. And recognize that the point of reading is other people's ideas are being shared with them. They get to know more about the world around them because of what is being written, because of what they are reading. So then it can be so neat to turn that around and show them in writing. You can express your own value. Other people will receive a better knowledge of the world around them because of what you wrote. And that can be such an exciting thing for these little ones to find out about. So I listed, we need to model its purpose and value. by writing down things that the children tell us. So we're going to talk a little about dictation as kind of a formal time of helping them write, but also just if they come running up to you and tell you this ridiculous story about how they chased a bear under their bed and now they needed a ruler or a stick or something because they needed to go fight it. The idea of having a book handy and listening to them and writing it down, they will see that their words and their ideas have this value. So writing down things that they're telling or stories they have, definitely spending time dictating with them, and to talk about the value of what your child has to share, to help them understand that this isn't just, it's not the same as a handwriting exercise where you're just practicing forming your letters and your words. This is about what you have to share, and that's a really empowering foundation for them to have. It goes back to that whole idea of you are a writer long before you can write. Did I skip one? Sorry, I just got lost. Nope. There we go. So we're about to get to my list of accommodations, but briefly, in order for a kindergartner to identify as a writer, first, that starts with drawing. It starts with coloring, and that's something that's really foundational to their writing. It does all of those, being able to put down on paper, make something permanent and share it with others. It is teaching those basics about writing. So sometimes the process or the time spent in coloring and drawing can be undervalued by adults because it seems like it's just something to entertain like the littles. And there's a lot of power there. So I would encourage everyone, have time drawing, coloring, talk about it, discuss it beforehand, ask what they want to draw, maybe why they want to draw it, encourage some details there. All of those, like including details and careful penmanship, those can start in your child's pictures. So it's a fantastic place to start. And then we're going to talk about taking steps, taking that creativity and not letting go of the drawing, but building onto it with words until they can also add their own sentences. Another accommodation that really doesn't go away all the way through the kindergarten year is prompts. Free-flowing free writing is just really hard for these littles. They might have an idea of their own story, which is great. If they just say, I know what I want to write about, like let them go for it. But typically it's really helpful to give them prompts and to help frame what it is they're working with their minds to tackle for them. So we're also going to look at the end at some writing prompt resources so that you also don't have to come up with every single one of these prompts yourself. But they're really great, and they're a good way to make sure that you're touching on opinion pieces, informative pieces, and narration. It just helps practice those different approaches to writing if you're already kind of packaging it and handing it to them with those prompts. And then discussion. We pre-teach, we talk through, and then we talk a bunch after. There's so much more talking than writing in kindergarten for a writing activity. And it's great because their writing is such a slow mechanical process for them that if they have ideas to share, then they're not going to be able to hold on to those ideas as they work through the mechanics of writing. So we talk about it in a chunk, and we talk at the pace of their thinking so that they can feel like they've got their whole idea. They can kind of step back and see the whole thing. And then we can zoom in and work on the coloring and the writing and mention details. And then afterwards, I can go back and read the whole idea back to them at a pace where they can see it and understand it and feel like, wow, I said all that. So lots of talking on all sides of the writing process is incredibly helpful for them to feel the ownership and validity of what it is that they're taking on. So yes, this is the year of accommodation. There are going to be all of these steps toward writing independently, and it all counts. It's all valid. Dictating, writing down what they're saying, it counts as writing. It's not cheating. Highlighting on a page and having them trace the highlighter, that is them doing their writing. It's not you guys waiting to start a writing program. It counts. So that's a really helpful attitude for us as parents and as teachers to take on, to make sure that we're seeing it as valid, because that will come across to your kids too, and they will feel it so much more as valid and important and worth doing, and not just busy work, which is absolutely what we want. Okay, so here is what I think are the steps toward more independent writing. This is something I came up with. There are probably some really good accommodations that I didn't think of. I think this is a pretty good order to think of them in. But again, the whole principle of homeschool is everybody learns a little bit differently. So this is a flow to be thoughtful and mindful of, and really pull from wherever you're feeling like your kindergartner could use a little extra support, or maybe use a little extra challenge. So like I said, we start with drawing and coloring. That's a really natural place to start. Maybe you have an older student who's actually writing on a prompt. Your kindergartner can draw a picture, and that is them doing their writing. And again, I would say talk about it beforehand, talk about it after, discuss the details, let them explain it to you, spend some time. Even with drawing and coloring, more time is spent talking than doing the drawing and coloring, in order for you to really unpack and infuse value into what they're doing as a writer.
Megan,
so that, yes.
We had one question about, what if your child doesn't like to draw, or it's a challenge for them to do that? Can you give us some ideas?
That can be really tricky, and I definitely have had kids in the classroom who have struggled with that. Sometimes it's because they haven't had a lot of drawing or coloring, and they're not used to it. So that can be daunting. And then there are other times where it just doesn't connect with them. It's never what they would go and choose to do recreationally. So that I would still have them do drawing and coloring. I think it's developmentally incredibly beneficial. It's a really good way to encourage fine motor skill and fine motor development. And we're working towards being able to write, and that handwriting process is even more exacting than coloring as far as fine motor goes. So I think without spending time on coloring and drawing, you're going to end up with even more frustration and feeling of failure in their handwriting practice, because it's just hard to make handwriting look good if you haven't had that practice. And with drawing, there's just more free-flowing opportunity for them to have some flexibility to still own and enjoy what they created. But yeah, it is a challenge. It's definitely something that maybe you would just have that drawing time once a day with your writing, instead of infusing drawing into a bunch of other disciplines through the day. So if it's just a misery for them, of course, the point of kindergarten writing is you're wanting them to get excited about being an author, being a writer. So you want to shrink maybe the time frame that you're doing, or maybe break it into, like just make the shapes today and we'll add color tomorrow, or break it into smaller pieces. But I would really encourage still seeing if, at least in writing, at least in when you set up a special time, put daily time into drawing and coloring, because it does so much developmentally. and that's a hard balance. It really depends on the family and on the student of how far to push that. We don't want tears, but again, trying to find a way where it's fun and connecting, but where they are getting some of those fine motor practices and observing details, and a chance to have a concept of something in their head and get it to a point where they can communicate it with others, is a beautiful and important step in kindergarten. Maybe trying some different mediums would help too. Ultimately, we want that fine motor practice with like a pencil and with crayons and markers and things, but you could also do sidewalk chalk in the spring and summer. You could do some painting. You could even do some like sand art or something where you're getting some different colored sands and practice sprinkling it in shapes. So you can start bringing in some art to try and soften that that struggle maybe. And typically kids who do struggle or don't like drawing and coloring are the ones where their hands get fatigued. It's a fine motor issue, and they actually do need more of that practice, but we want to find some alternative ways to build that strength and to get them to still enjoy sharing what they have to say. I hope that helps. And if that is a struggle, then looking up or talking to your sponsor teacher about some resources for non-writing or coloring fine motor strength development is another good way to do it, like working with Play-Doh or something that is not writing, but that will build that strength so that they end up having the skills and the practice to execute the coloring, but haven't used coloring to do it, so that they just hate that practice because it was just used to build strength. So there are some options for that. That would be my advice for struggling with or disliking coloring. It's hard, and it's definitely something to talk to them about and respect that this is hard for you, and I hear that, and let's put a time limit on it or something, but still trying to get to it daily. So that's coloring and discussing, and then moving into dictating. So being able to read a story to them, have them understand this is how a story goes, and now I want you to tell me a story. Or like I said, them running in and mentioning something, just start keeping a journal of anything interesting or funny that they're telling you. Have them stop and say, what were those words again? Can you say that again? I want to write that down. And that will build them up so much and they'll be really intentional. It's so fun to see them like stop and say this really clearly, and maybe add like 3 or 4 more sentences. You're like, I didn't sign up for this, I'm in the middle of dishes. But starting to write down what they have to say, it starts making them excited. And then sitting down and maybe reading that to a spouse or to an older sibling of theirs later and say, this is something that she shared with me earlier, so I wanted to read what I wrote down from her, and starting to have them understand this is writing. This is me having something to say and it getting preserved for others to understand. So that's you can tie dictating to colorings where they're just doing the illustrations and then telling you what to say and you're writing it down, and sometimes it makes no sense. Write it down anyway. It's their words. They get to share from their brain. You're just the pen for them, and they'll love it. So then the next step from there is tracing. So there are sometimes you can get like those dotted line tracing fonts on a computer. So you could type out a page with that and give a prompt that they have to trace, and then they can draw their picture with it. Or you can just do it. Man, I've written so many words and sentences in like dotted motion. But another thing that I really love doing is using a highlighter and writing the whole word or the whole sentence out, and then having them take a little pencil and use just that tip to go right in the middle of that highlighter. And it can be a good step for them, because when you glance at the page, you're seeing their pencil, because it's darker and stronger than the highlighter. So they really feel like they've written it. And it also is good for them because a highlighter is fat and they're practicing that fine motor of drawing that line right in the middle, and it can really help them as a guide, but it gives them some flexibility to where they're bringing that fine motor skill from themselves instead of just like connecting those little dots in a tracing book. So I really enjoy using highlighter to help kindergartners trace what it is that they want to say. The next step after that is maybe for a couple of keywords, I want them to write the whole thing without tracing. So I'll write it on a sticky note and stick that sticky note right next to where they want to write it. And it's something that we talk about. We go back to that discussing and we talk through, all right, you're going to trace all of this, but when you get to this word, I've written it on the sticky note and you're just going to look at it and write it just like I wrote it. So you're writing that on your own. But it's right next to where they want to write. So the transcribing is very close for them in their field of vision, and that really helps. So as they gain confidence with that, you can start moving it farther away. For me in the classroom, I would start writing words that the students were using up on the whiteboard in the front room. And it's amazing how much of a step that is from writing what is right here next to my paper to looking up across the room and having to look up there and then look back down on my paper. It's a stretch developmentally, but it helps them hold on to that idea, that letter formation, the sequence of letters in their head a little longer. And that starts developing their independent ability to write that word. So it seems like a little step, but it's actually really helpful. And it doesn't mean you have to have a whiteboard, but maybe you could build a word wall where you're putting up keywords that you're frequently using, maybe sight words that you've been practicing in your reader, or even just writing it out on a sticky note or a piece of paper or a little whiteboard and setting it up on the other side of the table for them to look at. But that's where they can start having their brains and their eyes stretch a little bit as they're doing that copying practice. The step after that would be, okay, I know you want me to write the word blue for you, but I know you know that sound. So just tell me the first sound. You tell me what sound I should start with, what letter I start with, and I'll help you with the rest. So then they have to start with that. Well, that's a B. Okay, write down the word B and then see if they can do a couple more, or maybe just start with, oh, you got the B, that's great. Okay, here I'll highlight the rest of the word for you so you can write the word blue. But you're building that need for them to decode it in their brain in little doable bites, so that it's never so much that they're going to shut down or that they're going to feel like it's something they can't actually do. And then once they're really comfortable with that, you can start asking them to do the whole word. Say, use your best guess spelling, listen to the sounds and just write what you hear. As long as they can read it back to you, it counts. It counts as writing, and it counts as quality kindergarten writing because they're sharing from their hearts and from their brains. So then I have, I think, this is so funny, Katrina, because we were talking about knowing how to do these transitions and screen sharing, and now my thing is acting up.
Well, so I have a question for you, because I've been homeschooling my kids for a while, and something that I just learned recently is the difference between handwriting and writing. And when you were talking about the tracing and highlighting, I just was thinking how important it would be to talk about how different the handwriting book is from writing. So would you just tell us that so we can all get it in our mind?
Yes. And that's something that kindergarten takes a minute for, but then after kindergarten right now, all of the elementary grades, you're supposed to give 4 different language arts grades for, and one of them is handwriting, and then another one is writing. So I've had this, a lot of people struggle with, well, they're the same thing. What do you mean? Handwriting is forming those letters. It's correct letter formation. It's how the script looks. Writing is the concepts that are being communicated, and they do absolutely work hand in hand. But there is support for kindergarten handwriting. There's not as much support for kindergarten writing, for helping them get ideas from their brain, or response to books or thoughts or ideas, helping them get that written from their own minds. So this, we're really looking at not how can I help them make the letter H correctly, but how can I help them say what they want to say in a way that other people will understand it the right way. And I talk a little bit about conventions a little farther on. Conventions is the term for correct capitalization, correct spacing. It's kind of, and punctuation. So it's kind of the fiddly bits of writing that are more similar to handwriting. I talk about those, and you can also talk about handwriting during a writing instruction time, but I frame them all very much as I want other people to understand what it is that you're saying. So the way that you're saying it, how can we use the writing tools that we have so that people will hear it that way and know just what you mean? So we talk about that with inflection, to notice where there's a comma or where there's an end of an idea, and how we put a period there so someone knows this is where we stop with that idea. I frame all of that during the writing time so that they're understanding all of handwriting and conventions as tools to help other people understand exactly how they want their ideas to be heard. So again, it's empowering. And it's really respectful of what it is that they want to say, so that they can start wanting to use those tools instead of being like, oh, I forgot the period and someone told me I need to put the period at the end. So we want to frame it so that this is the idea that they're sharing, and I love that. So let's make sure people know this is the end. What can you do to show them this is your whole idea? That's right, we talked about a period, so why don't you put a period right there? And then we'll have this whole idea all wrapped up and someone will know that's all from you. So is that helpful, Katrina? Is that what you meant by?
Yes, thanks for taking a minute to tell the difference.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's see if it'll go. Okay, so I had my daughter do some homework to create some samples, to talk about those steps. And she is in preschool right now, but she loves drawing and doing her letter work, and really, really, really wants to be in kindergarten. So I thought that she would be a good example for some of those early kindergarten skills. We started, you can see the highlighter up here for her name. So she was doing the pretty typical preschool practice of writing her name in all capitals. So we started off talking about, we're just going to use the capital at the first letter and then use lowercase, and I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to highlight the shapes, and then you get to use your pencil and trace in there so that you're writing your name like a big kindergartner instead, with just the capital in the first letter. So this is where we're using the highlighter. And then I have this prompt down here, I want to, and it's in that dotted traceable font, learn. And she can't read any of these words. She cannot read this sentence. It's okay. This is still her expressing her ideas. This is practicing the beginning of writing. And we sat down, I read this to her. I showed her this was the word learn. She's gonna trace it. And then we have this great big picture up here, or space for a picture. And she can think about what she thinks wanting to learn. What does that look like? What does she enjoy for learning? And can she draw a picture of what that looks like to learn? So she grabbed a crayon, she drew a desk, she drew a tub of pencils, and she drew a student, which she, for some reason, clarified this was not her, this was a student. I don't know. So we sat down, we talked about that, and it was great. She learned about labeling. So as she told me all of this, I asked if I could label her picture. And she was kind of hesitant at first, but she's asked me to label everything ever since. So I think she, again, sees that as empowering. Like, she knows other people will understand just what she meant by this picture. And we talked about all of these pieces. That she got this desk nice and high there. I can see the student with his legs. It's great. She included pencils. They really help us learn. And she did a great job with her tracing. When we sat down to do the next page the next day, first we got this out, and I had her go back and notice, you know, you only used one color and you did a great job with it, but when you look at pictures, don't you love lots of colors in them? And also, when you're doing a coloring book, you know how they do the lines all dark so you can see the shapes and then the color fills it in? So we started introducing some more specific skills to her drawing and say, why don't you use a pencil first to make all the shapes? And then you can fill them in with colors, and that can be a little easier for you to say, oh, I want this part this color and this part this other color. It can help bring in that colorful drawing, and it also really promotes that fine motor of practicing making the lines with a pencil. So on this second writing prompt, you'll notice she wrote her name all by herself, capital front and then lowercase after that. And she was really proud of herself. I think this is the first time she wrote her name in what she termed kindergarten style. And then we talked about the color I like best is also her favorite color is pink. She has pink hair. Everything is pink. She told me it was red. Okay. And there was a little bit of, are you sure that's your favorite? She wanted to say red, and that's okay. This is the whole point, is she gets to say and share what is coming from her. So I said, okay, your favorite color is red. And I wrote the word red with the highlighter, and she had to trace that, and she wrote her name independently. And then we talked about how she was going to draw a picture with a pencil first and then fill it in. And we talked about all of those steps first. And if that's all too much, following a bunch of steps and then going and doing that independently, that can be too much for kindergartners, and you really do a piece first, and then you talk about the next and do that piece and talk about the next. She wanted a list. She likes checklists. So we talked about all of that, and then she went and did it. We did have a little powwow about her picture, because I don't know if you can tell, but this right here is the only pencil in the picture. She drew red pajamas, and then I had to say, that's wonderful. Those are certainly red pajamas. Usually you wear them. Do you want to draw a person in there so they're wearing the pajamas? Because it was just this part right here. So then she went back and added, so it was a little bit of a prompt to add detail. And that's something we would do to older students in their writing. You can encourage that in younger students' drawing, because that's building that skill of attention to detail. So there's step-by-step progress between these two, and she felt that she was making progress and really enjoyed the attention of doing this and being heard and having this recorded. And you'll notice she wanted me to label it red PJs. So these are the next two that we did, and you can see the sticky notes. We jumped up to her copying the word. So she's writing her name by herself again, and this time we were talking about favorite books, and I have that book. We had just bought this book, Cozy by Jan Brett, about muskox. And so she said she likes to read about Cozy the muskox. So I had her draw the picture. I told her she has to trace the word read. She has to write her name by herself. And then what do you like to read about? She likes to read about cozy. So I wrote the word cozy and I did it in front of her. And I talked about, the cozy is a name. So just like your name, we're going to make the first letter capital and the other ones are going to be lowercase. And I stuck it right here. And I said, when you get to here, look down here and write it just like that right there. And she did a great job and we labeled it again. And this time, look at all of that pencil. She drew everything in pencil and then she added colors. So she really liked getting these little step-by-step skills that made her feel like she could do it more and more. The next picture really didn't introduce much here, but we did more. We did combos. So even in the muskox picture, we had tracing and we had copying. And here she's doing tracing and copying, but she's doing way more. I don't know if you can tell, but this time the whole line is tracing. So she had to trace all of these words. And that can fatigue a little kindergartner, but she did a great job with it. This was a blank, so she had to pick a season that she liked, and she picked winter. And so she had to write the word winter in there. In winter, I like to, and then she told me what she likes to do. And we said, go sledding. Now here's where I really could have pushed her. I could have stopped there and said, go, would you help me with that word? What's the first sound? And she could have told me it was a G. So I could have had her write that independently, and then I could have traced the rest with a highlighter for her to go over. I didn't, because there was so much tracing. It was more than she had done before. But looking back, she could have handled more. But that's something that you can file away for next time and say, I saw her being able to do all of that. I'm gonna push her to do that first sound next time. And these are some writing pieces from my son from last year. So I'm gonna show you guys the amazing kindergarten teacher skills of reading this out loud to you. So this says, the cake bakery has lots of cakes. They won! Note the exclamation point. They ate the cake. Yum, yum, yum. So he told this whole story. I think it was in response to having read a story about a baker. And he did this pretty independently. This was in February of last year, so getting close to about this time of year, but a little further along. He was so proud of the spacing. Definitely emphasized the spacing between words, and that's one of those conventions that we talk about, where if words are smushed together, I might read it like it's all one word and say, I don't think this is what you want people to hear. How can we show them these are two words? That's right, spacing. We want people to see what you mean and hear what you have to say. And then this is another one. Okay, so here's one that he did in his kindergarten class. And you can see it's traced, it's a prompt. And this is a little bit more of an advanced prompt, because at the beginning of the year, it would just be, I like to go to, where do you like to go to? Great, let's draw a picture of that place. But this time, we're adding a detail. We're adding a justification. Why do you like to go there? And so now you've got to say both of those things. It's more advanced thinking and more detailed sharing. And it's great to be starting to build those details and justification into his drawing and into his writing by the end of the kindergarten year. So he's tracing, I like to go to, and then he wrote the library. I like it because, and then he wrote, I like to check out books, crammed in there. And he's drawing, I think he's got some pencil lines in here, but he did a lot of drawing with crayon, this stinker. And this is actually something I just did today with my daughter. I was going through her composition book, and she had this whole page that was just the picture. She just filled in the picture with this very leggy bear and water with little things in it. So I pulled her over and I asked her to tell me all about this picture. And she had sentences and sentences for every detail. And then we talked about it for a while, and then I got out a pen and I said, can you tell me about that in like a story way that explains it with stories? And I started writing her words. And this was pure dictation. She didn't have to write any of this. And we just sat there and wrote it for a while. And she was so excited about it. And then after writing all about the bear that was there to eat the fish and how there were starfish in the pond as well, and there were trees and it was beautiful out, I just had her write, what was it? Here is the bear. And I wrote it with a highlighter and she traced it. And then she ran up to find my husband and say, Daddy, look what I wrote. Mom helped me write it, but I wrote it. And instantly this forgotten little picture became a whole story. And she has so much more pride in it now and reluctantly let me have the notebook to share and look at for tonight, because suddenly it's a treasure and not just a random picture. So honoring it with dictation empowered her as a writer. And that is huge in everything in the kindergarten year. I have a few points to talk about for those conventions. We mostly already addressed them, but we talk about the conventions and about writing long before they can actually do it. So I'm not saying you need to put a sentence or a period at the end of your sentence and then expecting them to be able to do it right away after that. We're taking really all of kindergarten to build these ideas in. And I had this this illustration of, you're not going to tell your little 4, 5, 6-year-old how to safely cross the street at a grocery store and then expect them to go do it by themselves the next time you go shopping. You're holding their hand, you're talking about it though, you're describing the rules, you're explaining how to be safe, and you're walking with them through that. And they need that same kind of modeling and that same explanation and evidence over and over again, long before you're expecting them to suddenly know it and do it on their own. They need that security of the hand holding as they're taking that risk of stepping out and sharing their ideas with others. It's very similar to a risk that they would feel in walking across the street or across the parking lot to a grocery store. So taking your time and really modeling and discussing it all the way through and practicing it so they can answer questions about it long before you're expecting them to do it. And I narrate my use of punctuation like I showed you guys with Cozy. I talked about how this is a capital C and because it's a name. So I would never expect her to have written Cozy with a capital C. I'm going to talk about it with her though, and she is interested in it, especially if I connect it to like her name and make it significant. And I ask questions all the time. This goes back to really wanting to be seen as someone who is helping them be heard the way they want to be heard. So instead of telling them you need to fix this or there's no space here, I'm going to ask them, here's what this sounds like, here's what someone might hear. Is this what you mean, or is there something else that we want to do with this to make sure that people are hearing it that way? Or what can you do to make it even better? And it's amazing how much asking them about their writing instead of telling them how to fix it will make them so willing to go back and do some editing, because they're not even seeing it as, oh, you messed up, you need to fix it before you can go. They're seeing it as a continuation of their expression. And I really encourage them. I'll model going back and reading back the work. And sometimes I'll read it and intentionally mess up based on something that isn't quite said right, so that they can hear, oh, someone hears that, but that's not what I mean. And then we can talk about it. And once they can develop some reading skills, then I'll have them go back and read it back. And afterwards ask them, is that how you would have said it just with speaking? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah. And sometimes they'll go, oh no, I would have, said, no, I can't think of an example. A lot of man, I'm trying to blank. A lot of times they'll use like an incorrect plural. And then when I ask them, how would you say that out loud? And they'll say it and realize, because of their like verbal knowledge of the English language, oh, I need to say that a different way. And then they'll fix it because they want their ideas in their head to be heard the way they mean them. And then again, encouraging ideas or encouraging details by talking, by asking questions, by having that happen before we write and after we write. So, you guys, thanks for enduring.
This is a question though, Megan, before you move on. So can you tell me how often you're writing with your kindergartners in the classroom and how often we should do it? And then how long you spend each time you write? Like, yes.
I write daily. I write daily. And sometimes it's pretty darn short. I tend to talk it out longer, especially in the homeschool setting, because it just turns into like talking sweet ideas with your kid. The length is a little bit tricky to pin down because we already talked about some kids don't like drawing. Some kids are really good at that and already writing words and working on putting together their own sentences. So I would say, as a rule, definitely not over 10 minutes, unless they're getting really detailed with their drawing and they're going for it. But the whole lesson, maybe 10 minutes, but that's including the dialogue on either side. And it's also something that you want to start out as pretty darn mild, just like we're talking about starting with dictation and eventually building that skill up to being able to work on writing sentences independently, or at least having the courage to try to write that sentence independently, to make that guess and go spelling. But it's something that they'll have to build stamina for. So it might start with a 3-minute activity if they're really not used to coloring too, and build up over the year to more of a 15-minute lesson where you're talking about connecting it with the prompt, you're discussing what it is they might want to say, you're responding to what they're saying and kind of reframing it into an itemized, here are the things you need to do on the page, and then giving them their independence time to work on it. And then coming back with them afterwards to reread it, to hear if that's what they wanted to say, and maybe ask for a little more detail in their drawing or in their words. And maybe pick, this is where you can tie that handwriting into. You can have them look at it all and say, which word do you think you wrote the best? Which one is just beautiful and so easy for someone to see and read and know just what you mean? And then say, do you think there's a word on here that maybe you could do over again as beautiful as that one you did great? And then they can go back, and that's practicing a little bit of editing, again, with this mindset of, how can I make others hear me the way I want to be heard? So I hope the duration is a little hard to answer, because I would say you're wanting to have them feel challenged but not fatigued, and to definitely be putting effort in but not hitting frustration levels. So anywhere between 3 minutes and 15 minutes if you're towards the end and really comfortable with drawing and writing. I hope that helps. But I like doing it daily.
No, that's super helpful. And I think that something that helped me when I'm teaching my own kids is that I don't think it even has to be a separate subject. You don't have to say like, well, I'm going to give you a writing prompt every day that's writing. You could say like, today we're doing a science project, and so my writing prompt is going to be tied to the science, or tomorrow maybe doing social studies, and my writing will be tied to that. So that maybe, and that's something that helped me incorporated into my daily writing is that it doesn't have to be separate. It can be included with whatever other thing you're doing. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to get a feel for that, because that's how I do my homeschooling, and that helps me know, oh, I don't have to spend an extra 10 minutes. It can be added onto what I'm already doing.
Yeah, and that can be such an enriching experience because you're getting that writing in, but that is such a great way to make those ideas concrete for the kids from that science lesson that you just did. Another thing that's kind of a deviation from that option, but another option is doing books, or like a my favorite set. And you can find, if you go on Teachers Pay Teachers, there's a lot of curriculum have these prompt ideas or book options where you might work through for a week, or maybe just on Fridays you do a my favorite or something. And again, this is an idea. I love just tying it to what you're doing that day, but sometimes that can be a real pride boost to your students as well, to your kiddos, of going, I'm making a book. And then by the end, having this coherent collection that they get to look at and show, that can be a really beautiful motivation for them as well. So, and you can try both. You can do, a unit study on writing a book for a while, read the library mouse and make books with them. And then for the next 2 weeks after that, you don't do an exclusively writing project. You just do a color page and trace a word that you learned in your science lesson that day. So you can do a hybrid of it. And again, it's really interesting to see what clicks with different kids and which things are unlocking their interest and their excitement about writing. And like Katrina said, it also matters to the parents too. If you can't handle doing another 10 minutes for a totally different thing, then tie it in with what you're already doing and check it off and remember it counts. That's kind of the anthem for kindergarten writing. If you have to do something that it just feels like you're accommodating writing right out of the picture, don't feel that way, because it counts. I have all of these resources hyperlinked. So do you know, Katrina, if we can put this PowerPoint as an attachment in the recording, or?
We can't, but we can make it available on our Family Partnership website, and we can also send it out as an email. So you can definitely receive this, but if you for some reason don't receive this and you're watching this recording, you can reach out to Megan or to me. So you can see her last name right there. You can see my name. I'll put both of our email addresses in the chat box, but just email us and say, I need this.
And I can click through it. I do have all of those tabs open, so I can just briefly show you, but I know like looking at it on the screen doesn't necessarily help you get to it to order it if it's really connecting with you. So I want to make sure that these are available and you guys can reach out if you're interested. The first two are a couple of notebooks for your kindergartner. And the important thing is that they're that widely ruled with the dotted line in there, that primary style notebook, so that they can really practice their handwriting. They can feel successful in that. And they also have big space for pictures. So this is the composition notebook style. My daughter really likes this because it looks like a big kid notebook, but Katrina turned me on to this one, which I actually really love. It has bigger lines, so there's less room to write, but they can really practice their writing really well. They don't need more than this, and there's more of the page for the picture than in the other notebook. So, and I really like the spiral because they can fold that extra page out of the way. It can be cumbersome for a little one to be dealing with both pages. So I like the spiral bound so they can get that out of the way. So those are two options for a writing notebook. This is, a lot of people use the Handwriting Without Tears for handwriting. I actually love it. I think it's a really good program, but there's also a building writers book that can go with it. And I don't think it's necessarily a complete writing program, especially at the kindergarten level. It's still pretty darn handwriting copy work, but it does start introducing some of that getting to add your own thoughts to the end of a sentence and building words together, and a little bit of the conventions. So we use the Building Writers book along with the Handwriting Without Tears with my first grade son. And it's pretty lightweight, but it's a good tool to make sure you're building a foundation. So that's another resource, especially if you're already using the Handwriting Without Tears curriculum and are familiar with its format. It's a pretty accessible intro to some structured writing support. Then I have a book of writing prompts, and this is again kind of like a workbook, but it's got those pages where there's room for a picture, and then it's a pre-written prompt on there. So if you don't have time to come up with something, you can pull one out and just talk through it with your student and help them finish that sentence and practice that tracing. So this is a handy grab and go. And again, from Katrina, this is brilliant. It's a calendar full of writing prompts. You guys would never even have to come up with one on your own. There's a prompt for every day of the week, which is great. I love that. Thank you so much for showing that to me, Katrina.
Well, it's free, so you know, it's super exciting to me.
That is free is really exciting. I love that. Then I've got, so this is kind of just, I thought it was really cute, and it might help some kids connect with writing. It doesn't actually do anything for the writing itself, but it adds these shapes on the top and bottom so you can turn it into this whole piece of wall art. And there are some really cute ones in here. There are silly little frogs, there are mice, there are holiday themed ones. So you can have a writing prompt and then you can add this whole shape. They can cut out the shape if they want, or they can put a big backdrop on it. It kind of turns their writing into a bigger deal celebration and can add kind of a craft or activity element to it. So I think this would not connect as well with my son. It would really connect with my daughter. It's one of those, this might help you, it might really not, but here's an idea to add some fun to the writing. These are build a story cards, which I love and are a little more accessible to older grades. And the idea is you'd have like a stack of setting cards, a stack of character cards, a problem, and you pull these cards at random, and sometimes they make really silly stories. It's wonderful for kids who have writer's block, who feel like they don't have anything to say. It gives a really fun and non-intimidating starting point. And I feel like these can be used for kindergarten as well, with those accommodations of saying, drawing pictures, or if you're talking about the sequence of a story, take a piece of paper and just block it out into 3 pieces and have your kindergartner draw a picture from the beginning of their story and the middle and the end, and then they can tell you, and my goodness, they will tell you every single detail, and your pencil will be going as they dictate that to you, and allow them to use this really fun and creative tool to unlock a story in their own heads. And there are lots of these everywhere. You can find build a story cards, you can find setting prompts and character prompts, and you can make your own too. You can sit around the kitchen table and have a stack of index cards and have everybody throw out the most ridiculous character ideas and make a whole stack of homemade character and setting and plot cards that you guys can use later. And this was a resource that I really enjoyed pulling some ideas from as well. This is Brave Writer. It's a whole writing program, and this little video is a good explanation for me of the beginning stages of writing and how to appreciate and slow down and remind yourself this counts. So it was an encouragement to me and a validation of kindergartners doing a lot of work that a lot of people don't count as work, but that really is work. It's hard work, and it is what sets them on wonderful paths of success later when things get a little more recognized as conventional academic work. So there's some good resources on here. There is even a writing kind of program called Jot It Down. It's the first level. It's really dictation is what we were talking about. And it talks about going from that beginning stage and working your way forward. They have a very slow outlook on writing. Here, they're talking about the Jot It Down stage being from ages 5 to 8. So really respecting kids taking their time to become the writers they are. A lot of kids, I think, are ready for doing more than that earlier than 8, but still recognizing this is absolutely a stage where they still need help. They still need that hand held up crossing the street, but you're talking about and exposing them to all of these rules and all of these empowering abilities, but you are sticking with them and walking with them through that time. So those were the resources that I had on at the end of my slideshow, and I would love if anybody else has some good resources. It's great to share. I would love building up kind of a little resource bank, especially for kindergarten writing, because it's, like I said, there aren't a lot of explicit resources for it, but it is such a rich and foundational time to explore. So that's my presentation.
It was amazing, Megan. I want to show really quickly because you prompted my brain. Blackbird and Company has a really fun Storymaker set that I just want to show you guys because it's made for older kids, but it's exactly what Megan was talking about. So I just want to show it to you guys. So here it is. This Storymaker. Well, no, I don't want to cancel the meeting. This Storymaker C Fun Tales bundle. It comes with these little tiny pieces, these little characters and things, and then you choose a character and you choose a setting card, and then basically you have to build a story around that. So I remember one of the ones I did with my kids, it was like a dragon and they were in a tree house, and then they had to pick out one of these little pieces here and add that into their story as the other character. And my kids just got so excited about writing the story with these silly little things that I wanted to share it with you guys, because anytime writing gets exciting, I want to jump on that boat. But that's the only bit of useful information I have to have. Megan, you are just full of so many great resources.
I love that. And Katrina, I've seen that a bunch before, and I didn't even think to pull that as my example. I really love that, especially for these younger ages, for incorporating the kindergartner, because you've got that kinesthetic piece too. It's not just reading a card. Suddenly you're looking at these little objects, and I love that. You could do it all without cards and just do objects. There are so many neat ways that you could bring kind of multi-sensory learning into that, and that's going to ignite the imagination of these kindergartners so quickly. So I thank you for pulling that up. I think that's a great resource, and I know it is marketed for more independent writers, but it would be perfect to be using and working with kindergartners too.
Well, again, the reason I asked Megan to come talk to you guys tonight is because I called her with my own kindergarten writing questions, and she empowered me, and I went home and did it, and it worked. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So Megan, thank you for sharing your brain and your wisdom and your experience with us tonight. This has been so helpful.
Awesome. I'm glad, and I'm happy to talk anytime if anybody has questions about it. I hope I can help, but
yeah, Megan's email's in the chat box, and again, you can reach out to either one of us anytime, but I just want to wish you guys all a wonderful evening and happy writing with your kindergartners.